Hello and welcome to Tech 24. I'm Anelise Borges. Coming up, caught red-handed. In today's show, we talk about Ryan Christopher Fogel, the young American accused of spying in Russia. Was he unprepared, or does this say something about the current challenges intelligence workers face every day on the job? Spying 2.0 is the topic of today's edition. And in Test 24, we'll take a look at Nokia's latest release, the Lumia 925. But first, Paris has its own domain name. .Paris was announced last week on the city's Twitter account, and other regional domains were also approved by ICANN. Take a look at the figure of the week, brought to you by Le Journal du Net.
Want to own a website that ends with .Paris? That should be possible by mid-2013. ICANN, the organization that regulates internet names, has greenlighted 300 generic top-level domains. They'll join the much-used .com and .org suffixes. Of the 300, only 6 were obtained by French organizations, whereas 50% went to U.S. organizations. That includes 22 for Amazon.com. At $185,000 a pop, that'll cost them a whopping $4 million.
Officially, Ryan Christopher Fogel worked as a junior diplomat at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. According to Russia, he's a spy working for the CIA. Fogel was arrested last week, carrying wigs, maps, compasses, wads of cash, and a letter addressed to potential Moscow operatives. This is the first case in more than a decade of a U.S. diplomat in Moscow being publicly accused of spying. Was he just an unprepared, inexperienced spy? Or does this say more about the current challenges intelligence workers face every day on the job? Today we're discussing Spy 2.0, and I'm now joined by former undercover CIA officer J.C. Carlson. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. And I would like to start asking you, what's your reaction to the Fogel story?
First, I should say that I don't know him, and I left the agency several years ago. But I will say that my first reaction was that if he were an imposter, he would probably have better gear, because frankly, you can buy better gear at any spy shop or internet retail store around. So I know that the media is giving him a very hard time, calling him James Blonde, and it's easy to see why. It's easy to turn your nose up at the simplistic and amateurish equipment he was carrying. But there are actually very, very good reasons for an intelligence officer to carry such simple, basic gear and avoid carrying better technology. First of all, going to the disguise, the wig that everyone likes to make fun of. The purpose of a disguise when you suspect you're under surveillance in an environment like Moscow is not to fool anyone or to deceive anyone at close range. The point is to change your profile. If you know you're under surveillance, you want to give your surveillance team easy ways to describe you so that you can evade and avoid the next surveillance team. So that means, for example, wearing a blonde wig and a red jacket so that when you get on the subway, you're the tall blonde in the red jacket, and doing a quick change. And again, that's going to leave you with only basic equipment so that when you get off at the next stop, you're instead the brunette wearing the blue baseball cap. You're changing your profile so that little by little you can slip away. So that's a very good reason for the low-rent disguise kit. And then regarding the letter that everyone's mocking as well, because it did read like the Nigerian scam letters, I agree with that. But there's also a good reason to stick to a typewritten letter. Anytime you're carrying any sort of technology, whether it's a thumb drive or any kind of recording device at all, you are leaving an electronic trail. So if you know that you're likely to be under surveillance, you have to be prepared for the worst case scenario. You have to be prepared for arrest. And the whole point is to avoid giving away any sources or methods if you are in fact arrested. So even a phone or any kind of GPS-enabled device rather than the map and compass also provides the arresting service with a history of your movements and perhaps a history of the movements of whichever of your colleagues carried the device before you. So sticking to the simplistic gear actually makes a great deal of sense in certain environments.
All right, now spies or intelligence workers must do more than simply take advantage of technology. They must always be one step ahead of everyone else. How can spying survive or even evolve in an era where information is no longer for the privileged few, but available to all on the internet?
It's definitely true that the internet has changed the spy game. I mean, we all saw the Arab Spring unfolding on Twitter faster than the CIA could keep up with it. And it's true that a great deal of data is out there that used to be considered classified or at least sensitive. Not long ago, something as simple as the organizational chart or a phone directory of a government ministry from a denied area country would have been considered a perfectly good day's work, a perfectly valid intelligence report from a CIA officer. But now that information is readily available on the internet. So that means that a lot of the low-hanging fruit is available out there and is making it harder for intelligence officers really on a day-to-day basis. They have to get closer to the decision makers because really we're not governed by data. We're not governed by spreadsheets. We're governed by humans. And data is never going to capture the nuances and the biases and the preferences and the vulnerabilities that impact decisions that in turn impact our world. So it's not necessarily about the technology. It's the spies have a piece of the action that transcends technology. And although obviously we want to stay current, and intelligence officers need to stay current, and if for no other reason than to avoid detection when carrying your GPS-enabled cell phone, for example. The world of espionage is not as dependent on technology as Hollywood would lead you to believe. It's far more psychology than technology.
But do you think that social networking impacts intelligence officers?
Absolutely, but it's a mixed bag. There are pros and cons to social networking. The pros, of course, are that we know far more about targets without ever meeting a person. I mean, we all Google people before we have a meeting with them. We all take a look at their Google Trail, for example, and their LinkedIn networks, and we know far more about targets without ever having to get any face time, which is great. We also are able to predict movements of people who may have been hard to meet in the past. We used to have to rely on fortuitous encounters with people from countries like North Korea, say, or countries like Iran, people who may not travel much. But now we're able to see these people posting on Chowhound asking which restaurant they should visit when
But that is also true the other way around, meaning if you use social networking, then you're easily found.
Exactly. And that really impacts intelligence officers dramatically when it comes to alias operations, for example. Working an alias used to be pretty much as easy as getting a halfway decent alias passport and printing up a few dozen business cards. Now, with social media, the absence of a trail is very apparent and it makes one look very suspicious. And aside from alias operations, even in true name, intelligence officers were initially very reluctant to engage in social media. Of course, I mean, what kind of CIA officer wants his or her details out for public consumption? But now we've reached a point, especially for younger officers, where the absence of a social media presence is suspicious in and of itself. So it's a complicated issue, and it's only going to get more complicated. But there are definitely pros and cons to it.
And what's the future of intelligence work, in your opinion? Is the field spy a dying breed to be replaced by the hacker?
Absolutely not. Data is great, but data will never give the full picture. Again, we're not governed by data, we're governed by people. And it's only by getting close to the decision makers and understanding the factors, the preferences, and the vulnerabilities and those are the people that intelligence officers target, that you will ever truly be able to predict world events. Data only tells you a small piece of the puzzle. You can have all the correct data in the world and still come to the wrong conclusion. So it's getting close to the people, and that's what intelligence officers do, that provides the full picture.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Carlson. I thank you again. And we're going to have to move on now. It's time for Test 24. Nokia announced its latest smartphone, Nokia Lumia 925, last week. The body has been upgraded, the frame's now metal, which also works as an antenna and in theory lends itself to improved reception. The AMOLED display is super bright, 600 nits. It's the brightest OLED screen you'll find in the market. And the screen is also extra sensitive. It works with both fingernails and gloves and is the most responsive that we've seen to date. Marc has tested it for us. Marc, what do you think?
Well, you mentioned the metal case. I personally thought it's a sleek, attractive addition to the Windows 8 phone range. What I really love is just how light it is. Have a feel.
Let me see. Oh, yeah.
Only
it's lighter than my papers.
Yeah, right in your paper. You've got a lot of papers there, Anelise. 139 grams compared to the Lumia 920, which weighed in over 180 grams. Big difference. The screen is beautiful. Have a look. I mean, I don't know if you can see the screen there. Very sleek. Using Carl Zeiss lenses. And if we take what I really love, the camera. If we can have a nice look at here. Can we see Anelise in the picture? I think it's basically got its own Instagram-style app where you can make the changes, the edits, before you've even taken the photo, which is fine, but also after. So that's a lot better than the Samsung S4, which you have to do beforehand. We'll take a nice little photo of you there. There we go, looking very nice. And you can do all sorts of editing, and it doesn't need all, these big editing suites afterwards. These are all things that can happen straight away.
Lovely. And how did you rate the phone?
Well, design, appearance, it's beautiful. It's very solid, 8 out of 10. I really love how it's designed. Easy to use. You've got to get used to the old, Windows 8, but I found it relatively easy. The problem is the value for money, Anelise. 599 euros. It's, considering it's putting itself in the best in class against the Samsung S4, against the iPhone 5. It's at that price. I'm probably not going to buy it, and as it has all pretty much the same spec as the Lumia 920, besides the fact that it's lighter and the camera, not a huge improvement at that price. I'm not going to be buying it. All
right, a message for Nokia. You better get a discount from Marc here, otherwise it's not going to happen. Thanks for that, Marc, and thank you for watching this edition of Tech 24. Don't forget, you can give us your feedback on the show via Facebook or Twitter. We leave it today with images of Now. The French robot, which was in this studio a couple of months ago, found a new job. He's teaching school children in Denmark math, English, and robot dance. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.
We're just two hands holding tight, just being with each other.